these claims are not your typical claims that you see in other areas of law, and you handle them completely differently, even before you file a lawsuit to the point where you do file a lawsuit. So all of that is very important because an attorney from a different state isn't going to know how to handle claims in Illinois. They're not going to know the specific rules that help or hurt your case. And then if they don't specialize in this area of law, they also won't know the different nuances of what policyholders have to do, the notifications they have to give before they file a lawsuit, and then the different options, before and after filing a lawsuit.
From humble beginnings, Insurance Claim HQ has grown to one of the largest property casualty firms in the country. We didn't do it alone, and you shouldn't either. Every week, we're talking to claims professionals and top experts from all over, all to help you grow your business and make you stronger. Let's level up together. I'm Galen Hare. Welcome to the Level Up Claims Podcast.
Every state in the country faces unique weather challenges, and Illinois is no exception. This Midwestern state can see damaging wind and hailstorms. Joining us today is an Insurance Claim HQ property casualty attorney who will explore these weather events, their related claims, and how policyholders can place themselves in the best position for these claims. Let's welcome Greta Lloyd. Greta, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Galen. Great to be joining you.
So, we've got a lot to talk about today, but let's start with you. How is it that Greta became an attorney?
So I actually walked into the wrong office for an interview, and I still got the job. And that is how I started my legal career, working at a plaintiff's personal injury firm.
Wait, are you like a Mike Ross, like from Suits? Like you became a lawyer before you were a lawyer?
Well, they were hiring for an attorney position. I was a law clerk at the time. Apparently, I was so persuasive that they still hired me, and I ended up clerking for several years for this personal injury attorney. And then afterwards, he hired me as an attorney when I was actually licensed to practice as an attorney as well.
That's probably a more legal way to do it than on Suits.
Yeah, it was.
So personal injury background. So talk to me about like what kind of led you to property casualty.
So I did that for a couple years, and then afterwards, I joined the dark side. I worked for insurance companies for many years, 7 or 8. Maybe 10 years. The time flies. And I realized, it just isn't for me. I didn't like working for insurance companies. I didn't like the way that they handled claims. And I said, you know what, I need to go back. Obviously, with the current weather in Illinois, there's a lot of claims, and a lot of people need help with them. And so it was the perfect fit for me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about that a little bit. So the weather has been freaking wild in the Midwest, right?
It has been.
It's like an untapped market. Like all these property casualty law firms, public adjusters, contractors, they run this Gulf South like it's like the be all end all. But I mean, there hasn't been like, I don't think you guys have had even like a 4-month stretch without bad weather, have you?
No, and funny enough, it actually hailed where I live a couple days ago as well. It's just the weather is. I mean, I'm sure as we've seen, it's more extreme everywhere. But I can definitely say from living in Illinois, we're having weather patterns that we've never had before, or I've never experienced, and it's just much more severe weather all the time.
Yeah, it's crazy, and the wind is just so high, even without like a hurricane, So. Let's kind of circle back for a second, though, and talk about, like, because you do have this experience representing insurance companies. What do you think that's taught you about, like, how to help policyholders today?
It's taught me to be patient. It's taught me that sometimes decisions to deny claims aren't necessarily because of the claim itself. It might be because of, some CEO making a decision about how much they want to pay that year. So it's keep fighting, because the right claim just needs to go in front of a jury. If it needs to go in front of a jury, they're the ones that are going to decide. But it's taught me that. It's also taught me, to take each claim and really work it up properly, because insurance companies don't always do the right thing. as we see all the time.
Yeah, unfortunately we do, right? But I got to feel like it gives you a little bit of a one up given that you've been in the other person's shoes, right?
Absolutely.
So let's start with kind of hail because we've been talking about how crazy the wind events are. You mentioned you got hail like just a couple of days ago, even
Yeah.
at your own place. Are there any kind of like patterns of denial for hail claims that you're seeing kind of in Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I see if, I mean, I see this unfortunately a lot of times if a claim is over a certain amount, it seems like some insurance companies just deny it because it's a larger claim. They'll come out and say, no, there was no hail, even though, I mean, there's clear pictures with hail dents all over the house. There's other situations where I see if someone's filed a prior claim, it seems like they almost automatically get denied as well. Um, and sometimes I really don't know why they're denying the claim. It seems pretty obvious. I mean, other situations, and a roof might not be brand new, so they're denying it, even though under their policy they should still be getting the claim approved and reimbursed for what's covered in their policy.
It's crazy. The ones, like, I really love the ones where they're like, it's a prior claim, so we're not going to pay because there was a prior claim. Of course, we also didn't pay the prior claim. We denied that one and said there was no damage. But now we're going to say there was damage before.
Yeah, I actually had a recent one like that where the attorney, we filed a lawsuit. The attorney called me and said, what are you doing with this claim? There was a claim 2 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, even better. So you came out, you inspected it, and you told me, not you, but this insurance company told me, or told our client, that there was no hail then. So good news, it wasn't then, it's now, because there's obvious damage to the roof. So they try to pull that all the time, and it sometimes it works out in our favor when they try to do that.
It's the best one. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to a jury and say, well, the thing is, we lied to our policyholder before when we said there was no damage? There actually was. We were just trying to trick them, and we
Yeah.
successfully tricked them, so now we shouldn't have to pay. Like,
I had
you're not going to
another
say
one
that.
recently too, where it was an engineer had gone out, inspected the property, and then they just came out again for a different claim, a couple of years later, and now they're saying, well, actually, the hail damage was from the first time. We just didn't notice it then, but we're noticing it now. But it was from the prior claim and not this one. So they try to do whatever they can to deny a claim, even admitting that they missed a bunch of things the first time and thinking that it'll help them. But yeah, I,
Yeah.
I do believe juries will see right past that. I mean, that's a ridiculous argument to be making.
Yeah, I think some of that is just partially kind of making it common sense for the finder of fact, the jury or the judge, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, can you tell us? So the other thing we saw, and those claims are starting to kind of dwindle down now. Finally, are these derecho claims? So first of all, for the folks from the South, can you tell us what the heck a derecho is?
It's a very large, severe, a very strong wind event. It's kind of a micro burst of wind that comes through, and a lot of times you'll see trees down, trees falling on houses. It's it causes a lot of damage to the properties.
Yeah, it sounds brutal. I mean, and I know, we did a ton cases together in Illinois. We also had a ton in Iowa, all from this derecho. It was like a dry hurricane, kind of, if that makes sense. It was so
Yeah,
weird.
absolutely.
I'd never seen
Yeah.
anything like it before. So, like, is this something you like grew up with, or?
I don't remember growing up with that, but it seems like it's happening a whole lot more. I mean, I can tell you, we even living in the city now, I've never had to worry about tornadoes coming through the city, but it just seems like the weather patterns, the obviously Illinois is very flat. There's a lot of tornadoes that come through, but it seems like everything is getting much more aggressive, much more violent, much more severe. Even the tornadoes are getting much closer to the city themselves, and so in the rest of the in Illinois, and what I mean is closer to the city of Chicago. The rest of Illinois, it seems like the tornadoes that are happening, the wind events that are happening, everything is just much more severe, causing more damage to the properties that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I know no one's supposed to use that word, but it's almost like the climate is altering slightly. It's just there's definitely things that are different. And you can't kind of ignore that. So all right, so in a world where there's like all these hail claims, more than there ever used to be, all these wind claims, more tornado claims, like how do you think, like what do you think the approach should be as a lawyer working for policyholders, like in a world where these carriers are more and more weighed down with all these additional claims?
The approach for the attorneys are make sure that you have the proof for each claim to show, document the damage, make sure that the damage is documented. Obviously, as attorneys, we don't go out there and we don't take the pictures, but make sure that, once you get a claim, you can um, have everything documented, have the weather event documented, have everything so that you can just present it right away to the insurance company, and they have a harder time refuting it, and hopefully you can get the claim settled faster for the homeowner. So I think it's, setting it up in a way where it's harder to deny that the damage exists.
That makes sense. And I think you're right. It's so important, especially as these events stack on top of each other, to really have that kind of proof. So, what are some? So, let's say like talking about these windstorms, right? Is there anything that kind of policyholders after a storm should be on the lookout for to figure out if they need to get someone, whether it's a public adjuster, a contractor, a lawyer, whether they should get someone involved to help out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, obviously after a storm, you need to contact your insurance company, but if and notify them of the damage. But if they come out and there's any sort of pushback, the insurance company is denying the damage that is obvious. I mean, for example, I have another claim where there was a windstorm. A tree fell on this person's house, and the insurance company took pictures of the tree on the house and then later claimed that there was no tree on the house. So I think it's, you know, when something like that happens, that is a giant red flag of you're not going to be able to handle this on your own. You need to get someone involved that is really going to represent you well and make sure that, once again, that you have the documentation to prove your claim. If the insurance company is saying, well, no, there's no tree on your house. What do you mean there's no tree on my house? It fell on there.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy, right? And anyone listening to this podcast knows that freaking happens. Like there's a tree on the house and they will just be like, "Yeah, we see no evidence there was ever a tree on your house." Well, number 1, my house is cut in two. That's a
Yeah,
pretty big indication. Like that is not my version of a fun Friday night is to take a chainsaw to my house, right?
exactly.
And number
But
2,
it's the
like
same thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no go, you're good.
I was going to say the same thing for hail claims. I mean, a lot of times insurance adjusters will come out and say, no, there's no damage to your house. I mean, I think it's definitely important to try to get, if something like that happens, get a second opinion, have a contractor come out, have a public adjuster come out and see, okay, what is the actual damage to my house? Don't just assume that your insurance company has your best interest in mind, because a lot of times they don't. And, that's something that you need to watch out for.
Now, one of the things that kind of comes up sometimes, and I'd like to address, is when we decided to go into the Illinois market, we kind of did that very intentionally. And we did that by adding you to our team and adding Encore to our team. And, it was important to us to find Illinois attorneys that knew Illinois law, you know, knowing we could help out with some of the property casualty stuff. But, I really felt like having an accomplished litigator like you is important to us expanding into Illinois. That is not what every law firm in the country does when they decide to move into a new market in our field, right? They just use a lawyer licensed in Texas, Florida, Louisiana, wherever. And, they pay someone essentially to use their license. Let's talk about why that doesn't work. Obviously, like, it's not ethical, it's bad, whatever. Like, I think anyone that cares already knows that, right?
Yeah.
But why is it important to get a lawyer that actually is licensed in that state, that actually litigates in that state?
It is so important to get an attorney licensed in the state. Every state is different. Every court is different. It is so important to know the rules, the nuances of, I mean, I'll be honest, even knowing how different judges react to different rulings, all of that puts you at such an advantage. It is completely different. And I think it's also really important to get an attorney that specializes in property casualty, because these claims are not your typical, your typical claims that you see in other areas of law, and you handle them completely differently, even before you file a lawsuit to the point where you do file a lawsuit. So all of that is very important because you know an, first of all, an attorney from a different state isn't going to know how to handle claims in Illinois. They're not going to know the specific rules that help or hurt your case. And then if they don't specialize in this area of law, they also won't know the different nuances of what policyholders have to do, the notifications they have to give before they file a lawsuit, and then the different options, before and after filing a lawsuit.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, right? Is every state kind of has their own rules. Like, can you think of anything kind of quirky or unique about Illinois, whether it's like some weird litigation deadline or whether it's property casualty that like just a lawyer from Texas might not know?
I think there's a lot of different rules. There's different rules about whether an appraisal gets paid for by the insurance company. It's different by state. It's different rules about when you can demand appraisal. There's different rules about what has to be filed when you do file a lawsuit, how it has to be filed. Different counties have varying rules of for example, there's Cook County in Chicago, or that covers Chicago. There's Lake County right north of Chicago that when you submit a complaint, you have to submit 5 other documents with it, or maybe not 5, it's 3 or 4. But if you don't know that, your complaints are going to get rejected and you won't be able to file things on time. So it's not only the different rules in Illinois, it's the different rules in each county. Even the federal courts are a little different, whether it's the northern district or the southern district. And knowing the different rules puts you at an advantage versus someone who doesn't. You don't want to be getting reprimanded by the judge, getting sanctioned for doing something wrong. So you definitely want an attorney that knows Illinois law and specializes in this area of law.
Yeah, the rejection of the filings was crazy to me. You and I had this discussion, I think, like a month ago, right? Because we get, and do not take this as an invitation to anyone that's listening, we get a lot of what I call last minute cases in Illinois where some other law firm had it, but ultimately wasn't licensed in that state. So they sat on it forever, or a contractor just sat on it because they didn't have a relationship with the law firm. So I feel like how many times, Greta, at least like 6 times a year, I call you and say, okay, so we've got this large property and the statute of limitations runs tomorrow, you know? But sometimes it's not doable because
Yeah.
of the filing requirements, right?
Yeah, and it's very stressful when that happens, because obviously we know that if we don't file the lawsuit on behalf of the policyholder, that's their last chance, and they probably won't get any money. But at the same time, like I was saying, in Lake County, for example, they're very particular. They take 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes it takes even more than that to approve or reject a filing. And they very often reject filings if they're not perfectly done. I mean, we had one time where there was something left off the summons, and it was the last digit of the phone number for the summons, or for the clerk for the court, and it was just the way that it was printed. And they rejected the filing. Luckily, it was weeks ahead of, or months ahead of time for that claim, so it wasn't a big deal. And we know to make sure that everything is perfectly right, or they will reject it, but they'll reject it a week later, and at that point the statute's already ran in some situations. So things like that are very, very important to know, to make sure that your claim is, well, hopefully you're not filing it last minute, but if you are, to make sure that it is done right, it's accepted, and it moves forward.
Oh yeah, the big takeaway, guys, at home is like, definitely don't do this at the last minute. It's
Oh,
terrible.
yeah.
It puts us all in a terrible position. And we want to do the best job for you. And if
Yeah.
we're stressed out that some clerk might get upset about a missing digit on a phone number that doesn't matter and reject it, like, our focus is not on actually moving your case forward. So don't wait. But yeah, it's crazy. And, I've had people that have called the day of statute of limitations, and now I know some of these things. And I'm like, look, guys, we can't help you. Had you called us a week ago, we probably could have pulled it off, but I can't have poor Greta and Ankur working until 11:59 p.m. only to then have the filing be rejected. And now it's
Well,
our
and
fault.
for example, there's other smaller counties where if it's not received by 4:49 or 459 on a certain day, it doesn't count as being filed that day, which, it's every county is different. It's knowing these things, okay, can I get it filed? Will I have all the documents on time to get it filed by that time? Or can I not accept that case because it's going to be too late? It's going to get rejected and the whole, that you won't be able to move forward.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking, because there's a real policyholder behind every one of those cases
Absolutely.
that ultimately can't get help. Yeah, in Louisiana they do the same thing, right? So we have like in the parishes where we don't have e-filing, there's fax filing, and fax filing is supposed to be 24 hours a day. Courts are always open. So some of the small parishes take the fax machine off the hook before they leave for the day. Because they don't want to deal with like having to have someone there at night filling up paper, et cetera, right? So they just take it off the hook. So you might think you can make that filing at 9 p.m. You can do that fax file, but it'll be off the hook and the fax will never go through.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. But again, like we know that because
Yep.
like I know that because I'm a Louisiana lawyer that practices in the state of Louisiana. But like some lawyer from Nebraska who's never practiced in Louisiana doesn't know that. And if they hire some quick, cheap local counsel that doesn't really do that, that lawyer doesn't care. That lawyer is essentially just getting paid for a license, right? So,
Yeah.
no, we've been really lucky and happy and, fortunate to have you on our team and help out. And, one of the things is you do bring that experience. So if you had to give a piece of advice to like a public adjuster that was interested in working in Illinois, what would you tell them?
Be ready to fight the claims because I think in Illinois, because they're not hurricane claims, because they're not, well, mainly hurricane claims, they really tend to fight you on them. Insurance companies are, a lot of insurance companies are headquartered here. And I think because there's more weather events now than there used to be, I honestly think they're trying to make it harder so that people are discouraged from filing claims. I think kind of know that, for certain claims, it might just take a little longer to get resolved. But don't be discouraged because, you still need to represent the policyholders. And so, like I said, it's really important to document everything right off the beginning because after a storm happens, the evidence is much stronger than it is a year later, when we get involved. Not to say that we need to get involved a year later, but that's what happens a lot. So, make sure you have everything documented, make sure you have all the estimates prepared if you can, and then your claim is much more likely to get resolved faster.
We
But
won't
that
we
said,
won't talk
know that
about
you will fight.
we won't talk about which insurance companies are based in Illinois. But yeah, they do have reputations for making it a little bit harder, don't they?
Yes, they do.
But the interesting difference there is for those of you that are lawyers listening, obviously you'll make this connection pretty quickly, but for non-lawyers too, there's this whole fight all around the country, whether you want to be in state court or federal court. And as a result of some of these insurance companies being based in Illinois, the state courts actually hear a lot more of these cases than they do in other states. Fair?
Absolutely, yeah. And I will say the other tip too is, for any public adjusters or anyone else listening out there, it a lot of times, insurance companies kind of draw a line in the sand, or you can just tell they start making things difficult. They come out for an inspection and say there's, minimal hail damage, or they start denying the claim. There's no reason to sit on it then because, or like certain insurance companies take months on months to respond. And it's going to take forever. If you want to speed the claim along, if we file a lawsuit, they have no other option but to respond. So that's always for the insurance companies that are difficult and slow to respond and, not behaving, not investigating the way that they should. If you get us involved and we file a lawsuit, there's court deadlines that they can't ignore. So
Yeah, and it
that's
sucks that
definitely.
sometimes you have to use a lawsuit just to get someone to respond, but you do, right? I mean, I was just looking at one today, potentially for you guys, where it's like it's kind of weird. It's an all perils policy, and I guess some rodents kind of chewed through some piping, which flooded the house, but 3 different times over the course of 3 days.
Hmm.
So, this huge insurance company, who shall remain nameless, based out of Illinois, wants confirmation that the only reason we got this phone call, like everything might be okay. They might not need a lawyer, but this insurance company will not pay for any ALE and will not pay anything until the homeowner first confirms that they agree that it's 3 separate claims. And
Yeah.
so this poor homeowner now is like calling for legal advice. They might not need any legal advice, right?
Yeah.
Like if this carrier just either treated it as 1 claim or 3, whatever the carrier was going to do, the numbers might pan out okay and everything might be all right. But instead they're forcing this person to look for a lawyer. And of course now we're asking questions and we're finding out other bad things about the way that this carrier that shall remain nameless is handling the claim, but very much based out of Illinois. And, and now this poor person is like calling attorneys just to try to see if they're being treated fairly when all this carrier had to do was do whatever they wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they were going to pay fairly.
Yeah. And, a lot of times it's very disheartening when you see this happening to a lot of homeowners where insurance carriers make things so difficult for them. They make them go through hoops. They're hire attorneys. And, I've had defense attorneys tell me, well, the insurance company would rather pay our legal fees than pay the insured. And I'm like, they have the insurance policy for this reason. This is a covered loss. Why are you fighting them so hard on this? I mean, it doesn't make sense. I don't know why they make things so difficult, but they do a lot of times, and that's why we're here.
Yep, to teach them a lesson, I guess. How dare you ask us to pay you what we owe you?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Greta, we're getting towards the end of our time. So before I let you go, what does it mean to you to level up?
To me, to level up a claim means having the claim worked up in such a way where if you need to take it all the way to trial, you can take it all the way to trial, so that you're not put in a position where you have to settle a claim for less than you need to. You're always ready to go all the way to trial and have a bunch of jurors tell the insurance company that they made a serious mistake.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Greta.
All right. Thank you, Galen.
I'd like to thank Greta Lloyd for joining us on the show. She said it great. At the end of the day, document, document, document. So you can go fight these claims, because at the end of the day, the insurance company will not treat you fairly, and sometimes they'll even lie about what happened. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player.